Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. And today we're going to talk about math and Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. And I look forward to discussing that with you. I'm going to talk about how math is used in Fallen Order and surrounding Fallen Order. I'll talk about things like the combat, the platforming, the puzzle solving, as well as just math on that larger scale, right? Like in that meta sense. And I'm also going to be talking about my experiences with the game and how I feel about it. Normally, I don't get too critical in these videos because it's not the point. But in this case, while I do have a lot of good things to say, I also have some not so good things to say. But I hope to deliver that in a way that's fairly balanced. Ultimately, I did enjoy playing the game, but there were some choices that were interesting and some things not quite done. And we'll get into that. So yeah, before we do, assume spoilers. Assume all the spoilers just to be safe. Anything Star Wars, you'll probably be good to go. But still, I rather you to be safe than sorry. So let's get into it. So with Fallen Order, it is an action adventure game, as some of you may know. Combat's a big part of it. Platforming is a big part of it. Puzzle solving is unfortunately a big part of it, and I'll get into that too. But as far as the game play goes overall, let's talk about that because there's math across the board. So, is Cal? You travel with Seer and Grease, your companions, throughout the galaxy after an inciting incident. And you have 5 planets to explore on a large level, and then kind of like a 6 one that you'll get to towards the end. And as you go through that game, you'll be facing down opponents, solving puzzles, and just going all around the place, right? And as far as the combat goes, it makes use of offensive techniques and defensive techniques. It makes use of your lightsaber as well as your force abilities. And there's math all across the board with it. For starters, you're trying to dish out damage while not taking it. And that health is an inherently mathematical thing, right? And on your end, you can see your health. There's a visual representation of that data. And you have force powers, which, how much you have is represented by a force gauge. So that too is mathematical. And how much damage you're dishing out, how much damage you're taking, the timing with your parrying, stuff like that is dictated by the difficulty. And unlike in most games, they do say a few things. Or they show a few things like what I just mentioned when you're looking at the different difficulty settings. They'll, show which is higher and which is lower, so you get an idea of things. Either way, whether they showed it or not, there's math in that, right? And with the combat, going back to that in particular, so you can attack using your lightsaber or force abilities, and you can defend. You have just regular blocking, but you have a block meter, so you can't just do unlimited blocking. And that block meter, right? It's a visual representation of how long you can block. And so you'll have to take a break. You'll have to anticipate your opponents and what they're going to do, right? And there's math in that. So as you're going on, right, you're dishing out damage, but you're either blocking or evading, and timing is key. And again, with that block feature, it's not unlimited, right? It has a meter. So, you're blocking attacks, but you don't want to block too many, or at the very least, you want to keep track of how high it is so you can know to move out the way. Now, there are some attacks that are unblockable, and you're definitely going to want to evade those or use your force powers. But the caveat being, if you use those force powers, your gauge will begin to, lower. But here's the thing about that, right? If you're strategic about it, that's okay. But there's math in that though. That's what my main thing is, right? And you're using math to decide when you're gonna attack, when you're gonna defend, when you're gonna get out of the way. And with the force powers, one of the cool things is if you are using them, right, you can attack your opponents with regular hits to build up that force gauge again. And so just with the combat, there is math involved, right, across the board. Math and how it functions, how it flows, and how it's actually getting to you, right? And you, sorry, even with bosses, they're going to be able to dish out more damage. They're going to be able to take less. They're going to hit you with some different kind of abilities, and there's math in that too. And I think that's pretty cool. And as you progress throughout the game, defeating opponents, you know, progressing the story and getting different items, you're going to be able to get more health, more force abilities, and you'll also be able to navigate, um, you know, all of your skills. So as you're going throughout the game, you don't get levels in the traditional sense, but you kind of do, right? Like when you're getting the skill points and things like that. So throughout the game, like I mentioned, like you know, you'll be defeating opponents. You'll be navigating the story and solving puzzles and things like that, and that'll build up skill points. And when you build up enough skill points, you can enhance different things, right? You can enhance your lightsaber abilities, your survival abilities, and the force abilities. And you can choose how you do that. And there's math in how you're getting to that point, right? There's math in how you're building up the skill points and math in how you use them. And I think that's pretty cool. And so you can decide how you want to branch out. And I think throughout a regular playthrough, I don't think it's unreasonable to say you can unlock all of the skill abilities. And like I said, they are around like lightsabers, survival, and the force. And throughout the game, your force abilities grow. So your main ability when you start is force slow, which is it's mathematical in nature, right? You're slowing down your opponents. You're slowing down their reaction time. When it comes to puzzles, you might be slowing down an item. But either way, you're using math to make that work for you to progress in the game and possibly use that as offense or defense in the combat. And a lot of the force powers can be used for puzzle solving or combat. And as you go on, you go from just having force slow to being able to do force push and force pull, which are traditional. Saber throw. You'll eventually be able to double jump. I'd argue too late in the game, but we'll get to that later. But my point is, you know, you're unlocking these abilities that you could use in combat, that you can use and puzzles, and it works out. And you know, and when you're in combat, you just have to be careful of your force gauge because certain things will drain them quicker. And when you're in that like skill tree, right, like you can upgrade your force powers is part of all that, right? But some of that, if you do it, is going to drain your gauge faster. So you really have to decide how you want to do your combat, right? You'll be doing a dance between offense, defense, and just getting out of the way, which you know, there's strategy in that, right? But the whole thing is like everything works pretty well, and I see the sunlight, but I'm gonna roll with it. It's nice, it's bright, but it makes my face look weird in this. Okay, maybe not weird, just different. But anyway, I digress. So there's a lot of math in the combat, right? And as you go on, so you have a droid companion in this one, BD1, right? And as you go on, BD1 will start to accrue stim packs, which will allow you to recover your health. And if you unlock a particular skill, they also allow you to restore your force power. And as you're unlocking some more skills, you'll be able to recover more. So, you know, it's like you'll, in theory, be using less stim packs in any like given battle scenario because you'll be able to recover your health and force on a larger scale, if that makes sense. So it's just like, so say you have like two, right? Then those stim packs are now doing more. Where in the past, like maybe you need two stim packs to recover your full health. Here you might just need the one. But you know, it depends on your situation, right? But that's the general idea. So throughout the game, you're getting more health. You're having the stim packs do more recovery for you, and there's the idea of save points here, where when you get to a save point, it recovers your health, it recovers your force, and it also recovers the amount of stim packs you have. Um, and the caveat to that is the enemies in your immediate area respawn. Now, if they're easy opponents, great. If they're not, maybe less so. But you do have the option of not engaging in a lot of fights. And so whether you choose to engage is going to be up to you. And that is something that is inherently a mathematical decision. And I think that's cool. And so with the puzzles, or let me start with the platforming. Like with the platforming, that's something that is mathematical in nature too, right? You have to have an idea of the different heights at play here, like the different distances you're going overall. You might have to use things like for push or force pull at certain points as you progress through the game, and some puzzles force slow. In general, right? It's just you're trying to get from point A to point B and be aware of your surroundings, be aware of um, different heights and different abilities you might have to use. Because, like I said, you might have to use something like force pull to maybe grab a vine or something. You might have to double jump in certain cases. You have to be cautious of what's going on when you're doing your wall run because you want to jump at the right time. But no matter how you cut it, there's math involved, right? And with the puzzle solving, you might have to do different things like force push on certain items or force slow or use force pull to get certain items certain places. But whatever the case may be, you're dealing with math along the way. You're dealing with math and figuring out the puzzle and moving items and getting point A from point A to point B to having certain events unfold. Whatever the case may be, you are using math. And for the record, I'm not a big fan of puzzles, but we're going to get to that too. So whether you were talking about the combat, the puzzle solving, or the platform, there's math across the board in the gameplay. There's also math in how that world gets to you, right? Math and how the worlds are constructed within the game, math and how you navigate them, math and the design, the level design overall, right? Math and in the programming involved to construct this game, math and the voice acting and the motion capture and the lighting and the sound. A lot of things come together to make a game work, right? And there's math in the marketing and the budgeting, math and money, just all across the board with it, right? There's math and the money it takes to create the game, to have certain budgets for certain parts of the game. There's math and the money on your end too, right? Because you got to decide to buy this game or not, and you got to figure if it's a worth it investment to you. And you might be the type that does research. You might look at different gaming sites, different gaming magazines, whatever the case may be, and some of them are going to give a review. They're going to have a score with that, but whether they use a direct number or not, right? It's mathematical to review a game, to dissect that, and you got to decide though what that means to you, right? Because you might see this score or that score. Is it from a trusted source? Do you have that sort of history? And then once you get the game, if you get the game, you got to decide how you're playing it, right? And there's options in that. You get to strategize. There's a lot of math that goes into determining how the game is played, but there's a lot of math in playing it, right? Because you're making decisions based on what you know about the game. You are unfolding it on their terms, sure, but also your own, right? And I always think that's I always thought that's an amazing thing about gaming, right? Because there's a lot of math and a lot of art in determining how a game gets to you, but there's a lot of math and a lot of art in playing it on your end, and that dictates your experience. And I think that's really cool. So you got to determine one, if you're going to buy the game, and then how much time you're going to invest in it, and how you're playing it, right? Because you are determining how you're doing combat, right? You have a lot of options at your disposal, but you don't have to do combat a specific way, right? I mean, there's limits within the context of the game, but you're using those limits and you're determining how you're going to go about things and how you're going to solve a problem. And I think that's interesting. And there's more than one solution for a lot of the puzzle solving aspects of it, right? Um, and I think that's all cool. And there's math in the music, uh, math and how like the bosses function and flow. I talked about that a little bit, but they can dish out more damage. They can take less, and there's just a lot of math in that, and uh, making a boss fight feel like a boss fight, right? Math in the music that goes with that, math in the atmosphere, right? Fighting a boss is gonna feel different than like fighting a grunt, and I think that's interesting. And it is getting really bright. Not that I'm complaining though, because I do like the sunlight. It's just like it's hitting things a little different right now for the lighting in this video. But we're gonna continue to roll with it. Again, I do like the light. Um, but yeah, so there's a lot of math and Fallen Order, just like across the board, and I think that's most visible with the gameplay. But there's a lot of math behind the scenes in addition to the stuff that you're seeing on the surface, and that goes um, on a larger scale. But even with the stuff that you see, like with the gameplay, like I said, that's probably the most visible the math is. But there's still a lot of behind the scenes stuff with that too, in addition to all the other elements of the game. And I think that's really cool because you have like tons of people working on these sort of things, all coming together, thinking about the logistics, doing the programming, doing the development, handling the music, handling the voice acting, the motion capture, having different budgets for different things, and still having everything come together in a cohesive way. Regardless whether you like a game or not, it's a crazy endeavor um, that a lot of people, you know, come together for. Um, and I think that's interesting. And I have so much to say about gaming in general. I mean, I have like 200 plus videos about gaming on my channel. And I'm sure there's going to be 200 plus more, at least 200. But I'd be willing to bet way more than that down the line. And I know that because I've written out some ideas for a lot of that. But getting them to you all is a different story, right? I gotta have the time and energy and effort for it, but like the ideas are there. Um, but so now that we talked a lot about that, let's talk about how I feel about the game. So normally when I'm talking about like different games on my channel, I don't normally talk about ones that I'm not absolutely crazy about or that I'm absolutely intrigued by. Um, Here, in this case, Fallen Order is a very interesting game, but I have some issues with it. I have mixed feelings with it. So I want to talk about some of the good and some of the bad. Which again, like I don't normally talk about the bad here, but and I don't normally think it's does anything for me, and I don't think it'll normally do anything for you. But here, I have some like legitimate gripes here, and I think is worth talking about because some of these issues have gotten talked about with Fallen Order, but some of them I feel like have kind of fallen to the wayside. Uh, so let's get into that. So overall, I liked Fallen Order. It's a good game, but it's not a great one. Here's why I say that. Because one, um, I like the story, even despite some of the choices made. Like just the journey itself was, I didn't like how that started. Not the very beginning, but just like the whole find this item and that item to prove yourself. I hate that sort of thing because it's just like, well, if you actually want the Jedi Order to be revived, then I mean, might want to try some different strategies there. Um, but despite that opening, it's just like I like the story overall. It's a good story. It's a good entry. I always think like you can like navigate different parts of the Star Wars mythos, and you can write a good story. And I do think like we have a oversaturation between what's happened in between episode two and episode three, and episode three and episode four, and while I do get kind of annoyed by that, there has been some good stories that have come out of those eras over the years. And so in this case, I think this is one of the decent ones. And so I enjoyed the stories. I enjoyed the characters even more. I wish that you had like more time with more characters. I definitely think like in the future, I don't know what they're doing for like a Survivor, for Jedi Survivor, but like I would like to play like as different characters as well. Like I would have liked to have gotten to play as Seer. I would have liked to have gotten to play as the Night Sister Mern. Stuff like that. I hope they add more to it because I feel like they could have had different takes on like the Force and how they do different things there. Notably, the Night Sister. I think that would have been interesting because I feel like with Sarah, you do at least get to travel through with her throughout the game and get to know more of her backstory. But I think it would have been cool to play as her too. And with the Night Sister, I don't feel like she's in the game nearly enough, and that's like that's a problem that I have with some other things. But I'll get to that. Overall, like the story and characters were some of the best parts of the game. As far as the gameplay is concerned, I really like the combat. That's fun. At its best, it's a blast. Um, but I do think the platforming and the puzzle solving needed work. For the platforming, when things worked well, they worked really well. But it wasn't as tight as it could be. And the puzzle solving was kind of trash. Like there wasn't a puzzle that I solved in that game that was particularly hard. However, they're not the most intuitive of things, and whether you're solving them reasonably quickly or it might take a bit in some cases, it wasn't fun either way. Like they weren't good puzzles to me. But that's my personal opinion. Mileage may vary on that, right? Um, but I didn't like the puzzle at all. I thought the platforming again, it worked when it worked well. It worked really well. So and it could be really fun. Like I like the wall running. I like double jumping. I like doing stuff like that and using force abilities that help you platform. But I do think there are some areas of this game that could work better. Technical issues aside, but I'll get to that too. Um, I felt like there's too much backtracking for me, right? Like I felt like you're forced to kind of go back to the world at different points once you unlock different abilities. And in my opinion, once you've been to the world like once, right, and you get to explore things without getting to the other areas, it's already like you got a good sense of what that world is and what it's about. And at least for me, I was kind of done, right? But then you have to go back with different abilities. You get different areas, and that's fine, that's good. But it's just like I've already been to this world. I've kind of had my fill. Um, and there's no fast travel, and I think that's really annoying and was a mistake because like you have to go backtrack into these worlds, and yes, you can unlock shortcuts, but you're still going to be going a considerable amount before getting to where you need to go, and that's annoying. It's just like why not go to like the different save points along the way? Why not have that fast travel? It ends up wasting a lot of time to me. And again, too much backtracking. Like at least that's again my opinion. But design choices aside, there were a lot of technical issues as well as a lack of polish. I like the combat very much, but there were parts where I felt like that could be tightened up. But more than that, there was definitely like some glitches along the way. Sometimes outright crashes. I've had that happen multiple times throughout the game, or just getting into some areas where it's like this puzzle or this combat situation might be a little tougher because a bug started happening and it's like hard to navigate through it. And that was less than ideal. So, and my thing is like, so the game was developed by Respawn, and I think overall they did a reasonably well job, especially because Fallen Order wasn't intended to be a Star Wars game at first. It was going to be some original title, and then EA came along and they were like, oh, well, okay, this could be a good Star Wars game. And I think ultimately it did become a good Star Wars game, but it could have been a great one. And let's speak of EA. They are the publishers for that game, and I don't know the behind the scenes, but I felt like with their name attached to it, they could have polished that a little bit more. But depending on what you know about EA, You may or may not be surprised by the fact that it wasn't. It depends. There's a lot of things you could say. Just saying. And whether you're accurate or not, it's up for debate, right? But I do think there are some issues there, and they could have tightened it. They're a big publisher, and they had a big IP on their hands. And I don't know if Crunch was involved, but there's a good chance that it was. It's the video game industry, and that's a factor too. So I think like overall the game was good, but it could have been great. It probably deserved some more time in the oven, and that probably would have been to its benefit. But overall, I didn't regret my experience, and I am glad that I finished it. But there definitely was times where I'm like, this is annoying, or this isn't boring me now, and I wanted to stop. But I am glad I pressed forward. And again, it's good. It just could have been great. But I do think it is worth exploring either way. I'll see you in the next one.